Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations. This is BJJ Meditations episode number 75. I'm your host, Joe Hannon, Joe from Jersey. I'm sick. It wouldn't be a Jiu Jitsu competition without me being sick. Seems to be the pattern. I was sick at Masters Worlds last year, some sort of upper respiratory infection. I was sick in Miami. My wife and my son had COVID, and I never tested positive, though I certainly wasn't feeling great leading up to the Miami Open. Was sick at the New York Open. Most likely also had bronchitis then, and we'll be going into this New York Open too, not at 100% cardiovascularly. That's for sure. Started to feel shitty. First of all, we were at the beach, which I talked about in my last episode. We had to leave a day early because my son was not feeling well. It was obvious, very lethargic, somewhat feverish. Came home, brought him to urgent care. He had bronchitis. So it was my turn. And my wife and I were talking about this last night on the couch. She said, there seems to be a pattern here. Whenever you're competing, you tend to get sick. And I said, yeah, I don't know how much of that pattern is informed by the fact that we live with a little disease vector, and how much of the pattern is informed by the fact that I'm pushing myself, and how much of the pattern is informed by the fact that I'm under a lot of psychological distress too. I think that sickness of the soul has a way of manifesting itself in sickness of the body, and I think all these things are happening at once. Throw a midlife crisis into the mix for spice, and you got yourself a pretty tasty little meal there. Yeah, I've been sitting with a lot of heavy questions about who I am, what I value, and what do I want to do in this back half of life. And I listened to this fantastic episode by a Jungian psychologist by the name of James Hollis, Jungian analyst, who was on the Huberman Lab some months ago. Fantastic episode. I picked up his book called Under Saturn's Shadow, which is sort of about specific to men or our masculine elements, and how specifically we are living out this ancient trauma pattern that's kind of up to us to break. I'll probably read his other book after this called Swamplands of the Soul, which is specifically about midlife. But being a father, being 37, thinking about who I want to be for my son, how to be the best father possible for him, things I talked about in the last episode. And also, what do I want to do in a meaningful way to improve the world for him? Hollis said in the Huberman Lab episode that the first half of life is by and large a mistake. I think he's right, but it's a mistake that ultimately we have to make and learn from, or not. So here I am trying to learn from it. And it's no surprise to me that I would be grappling with these huge existential questions, which I think the midlife crisis thing will be an episode worthy of a singular episode. I'm not going to devote too much time to it here. But I think it certainly helps to have a tangible practice like grappling to sort of be doing this existential grappling at the same time. But anyway, it's interesting that this sickness would arise at the same time that I was feeling this profound sickness of the soul. And I've been really trying to lean into the Jungian perspective hard these past few weeks, just because it's something that served me really well in times of tumult. I really started to get into Carl Jung this summer of 2019, and of course that came in really handy later on in the spring and summer of 2020. But depth psychology and sort of an archetypal framework makes sense to me as a way of understanding yourself if you're someone like me who is drawn to storytelling and drawn to looking at how these patterns show up from the most ancient stories up until the present, and also in our own lives. So leaning heavily into the Carl Jung side of things, paying a lot of attention to my dreams to try and suss out what's going on here. I've also been taking a ton of L-theanine just to spice up my dreams even more. And they've been illuminating these past few weeks. I started taking the theanine again when I was in LBI and was immediately visited by two of my deceased friends from high school. I had a bizarre dream the other night involving Frank Sinatra. If any of you know me, I just hate Frank Sinatra. But I'm paying attention to these things, and I'm trying to understand what my psyche is telling me, because it can only speak to me in these images and these riddles. And in this episode is sort of going to be a summation of what it's telling me with regard to this competition on Saturday and this illness. And I think what I'm learning as I'm navigating this existential crisis, as I'm preparing for this competition, as I'm healing from being sick, is that it's got me questioning why specifically this drive, why this drive to compete, why this drive to measure success in certain ways that are, let's just say, stereotypically unhelpful in the masculine sense of things. Like, why am I intent on giving money so much power and agency over my sense of self-worth? Why the approval of others? Why status? Who cares about these fucking things? Well, we do. I do. And there's probably good adaptive reasons for caring about them. But those reasons have outlived their usefulness, and I don't want to carry them into the second half of life. So specifically, why do I care so much about this drive to compete? It all, to me, when I look hard at it and ask myself this question and answer brutally, it's about proving something. It's about proving something to other people. And I think it should really be about proving something to myself. And I think that something is worthiness. And this all stems from being sexually abused as a kid. That provoked a lot of shame, obviously. I was raised in a fairly Christian household, and I didn't really understand what happened to me, but I understood that it was wrong in a sinful sense, and I truly believed that I was going to hell for it. And I blamed myself for it. I blamed my lack of intelligence that I would allow something like this to happen to me. And I was taken advantage of by a bunch of older boys. These were guys who, they weren't quite adults, but they were old enough to know better. And I was just a kid, and the fact of the matter is, like, I did not know what was happening to me. I only knew when it was over that it was a terrible thing. And I only knew that I was the last person standing, and the blame most likely rested with me. So I shouldered that blame for years, and that shame for years. And I think one of the ways that I compensate for it, because it's still there, is this drive for success, this drive to win. It's really about earning the love and respect of others that I could never give to myself. Logically, I can look at it and say, like, yeah, I know that winning a world championship is not going to give me what I'm missing here. Like, only I can do it for me. But that adaptive pattern is really hardwired, and it's running. It's sort of like a background operating system that's just running constantly. And unless you make conscious what is unconscious, there's no chance of changing it. So that's what this process is about for me now in the second half of life. What unconscious processes are running? How can I make them conscious? And then how can I reprogram them? And this is just one of them. So let's talk about this competition specifically. I stated explicitly in earlier episodes of this podcast that I'm giving myself the permission to believe that I can win, and that's not changing. But what's changing is why I'm doing that. Why I'm doing this now is it's for me. It's for me. It's outcome be damned. I'm doing this thing because it makes me a better person. it makes me more resilient. It puts me in touch with the darker elements of myself that need changing, and it illuminates the brighter elements of myself that don't. Worthiness has nothing to do with either of those things. It's just the process of becoming that I'm talking about here. And yeah, I want to be a world champion. I'm open to the possibility that that's going to take a really long fucking timeline to happen. I'm also open to the possibility that it will never happen. It might not. There are no guarantees in life. And yeah, victory is awesome. It's sweet. Defeat sucks. But so what? I'm here. It doesn't matter. Regardless of the flavor of the outcome, I'm still here, and it really does not fucking matter. I have this brain. I have this body. I have this soul. And I'm here to make the most of them. And this process of making the most of them, this process of making, that's what it's all about. It's iterative. We use what we learn from the last creation to make the next one even better. Jiu Jitsu is no different. Jiu Jitsu competition is no different. So I'm going to run it out there on Saturday. I think the guy who detached my foot in Miami is in my bracket. If it's not him, it's some other guy who's 9th ranked in the world. Maybe I'll end up fighting him. Maybe I won't. I don't know. But yeah, as you guys know, whenever I go into one of these competitions, I like to set a goal that I have definitive control over. Regardless of outcome, this is something that I can do. I don't recall what my goal was for the New York Open the last time, but realistically, I feel like shit right now. I'm having a hard time catching my breath recording this podcast. I've had a hard time training. It's kind of miraculous that I've been able to train these past few days. I thought on Saturday, I got sick on Friday, and I'm sorry, I got sick on, what day did I get sick on? I don't remember if it was Thursday or Friday. Either way, I went to the doctor because all the signs were there that things were starting to slide. And I remember I got my antibiotics, I started taking them, and I remember going to bed on, I want to say it was Friday night, thinking to myself, well, if this doesn't turn around by tomorrow morning, I'm probably going to be in the hospital with pneumonia. And I woke up and it had turned around. I feel like I have 80% of my lung capacity right now. I don't know if that's going to change. So what can I realistically expect of myself? What goal can I realistically set going into this competition? And my goal this time is to just leave it all out on the mat. Every ounce of sweat, every ounce of grit and determination, just leave it all the fuck out onto the mat. Just fight like a caged animal, because it's kind of what I am right now. And then secondary to that, to learn from the experience, because this is an iterative process. And when we pay attention, when we set the right feedback loops, the iterations only get better. So that's what I'm about. That's what I'm about from here on out. So on to Worlds, on with life. I'll see you on the path. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of BJJ Meditations. As always, I'd love to hear from you if any of this moves you in any way. You can email me at bjjmeditations@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, BJJ_meditations. Thank you very much for listening, folks. I'll be back next week with an update from New York.